I'm like, hey, keep a hard eye out on Cordell Patterson, right, dude? Nope, go fuck yourself.
Absolutely not.
You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, where men of fantasy genius have realized, hey guys, we don't need real football skills to dominate on the fantasy field. Yeah. So slap on your pads and grab your helmet. Shit's about to get real.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I'm your host for this week. My name's Nick Walsh, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host. That's Vinny Gonzalez. Vinny, what's up, dude?
Hey, man. What's going on?
Not much, man. Just kind of hanging out, ready to talk about the GD AFC West, dude. My favorite division ever. So that's what we're going to do today. But before we get into that, got to give a shout-out to Vupiq. Vupiq is the revolutionary app that allows you to play fantasy football live while you are watching the game on TV. Predict the plays, the result of the play, and literally play fantasy football. You can sign up for the beta now by going to letstalkfantasyfootball.com/Vupiq. All right, so Vinny, here's what we're going to get into tonight. We're going to do the first half of the AFC West preview. That's going to be Chiefs and Raiders. We're going to get into a little bit of NFL news. Obviously, next show we'll have the rest of the AFC West. That'll be Chargers and Broncos. Listening, you've heard about it, but we have Android and iOS apps. Definitely check that out at letstalkfantasyfootball.com/Apple or letstalkfantasyfootball.com/Android, depending on what kind of phone you have. You have an Android, right? You have a shitty Android, something like that?
Yes, I have a shitty Android. I actually love my Android, dude. Shut up. But
all right, I'm sorry. I just know my text turn green when I send them to you, and I hate it. It's stupid. But that's all right. I'll keep texting you, maybe.
Pros and cons.
Yeah. And then also, guys, you can use Let's Talk Fantasy Football through Google or what is it? Echo, Alexa, those things.
Yeah, Amazon Echo and the Alexa Dot. So it's all the same thing.
Hell yeah! So basically, what you can do, if you have the Let's Talk Fantasy Football app on there, you can ask Alexa, "What's my flash briefing?" You'll get NFL news and notes. You can say, "Alexa, open the Fantasy Football podcast." Alexa, open Let's Talk Fantasy Football. It'll bring up a whole bunch of different options for it. It's really cool. If you can actually talk about fantasy football to a robot. And we're helping you with that. So how about it? Vinny, have you done that yet?
Yes, it's the way of the future.
You fucked around with it?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's pretty much what we do on here. You give you the flash briefing, go through. The ADP thing is cool, and when you get stats, it's also cool because you can literally say, hey, how many touchdowns did Phillip Rivers throw in 2016? And it'll tell you. Hell
yeah. It's extremely cool stuff. Definitely check it out. All right, dude, you ready to get into some news from this week?
Yeah, let's fucking go.
All right, hit me with some news. Lead me off here, pal.
Cool. So the big thing we got from Don, actually, which I think was via SleeperBot, Jaron Brown. I'm not sure how you say it.
Jaron, I think.
Jaron is now running as the number 2 receiver for the Cardinals because John Brown is dealing with his sickle cell trait and, lingering injuries. So that is interesting to note because we pretty much pegged John Brown as a deep sleeper, as we usually do every year. So it's definitely worth noting that things are changing on the depth chart and he might not be in the Cardinals' future plans or the plans for the immediate future.
Yeah, and Jaron Brown is currently not being drafted. I'm sure that'll change after this news. I think the Cardinals' offense is going to kind of be a bit better than last year, despite Carson Palmer being yet another year older. So keep an eye out there for Jaron Brown. Nice late round flyer, certainly at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other news we have, which is pretty big because he's going as a top 2 pick for sure in drafts. Well, I shouldn't say that because Antonio Brown's working his way up, but Le'Veon Bell plans to report to camp by the end of the month. This is good because he's not going to hold out for the rest of the year. He'll hopefully come back, sign his franchise tag, and play awesome football for your fantasy team. So take that as you will.
For sure. I had a friend actually ask me about that today, whether what I thought about whether it would affect him. And I don't think it will. What do you think? Like, do you think him missing camp is a reason to downgrade him, or does it not matter to you?
No, not it really doesn't matter. And like, really, what's a downgrade for Bell? He's like second pick. It's anywhere from like, it's not really a down. It's like a pick. So it's not anything crazy. I think you're pretty stupid to pass up Bell if you're a top 3 pick at any point in the draft. So I don't see it affecting him. I think he's just too good.
Yeah, I agree with that. You do see things where it can lead to like, muscle injuries, muscle pulls, that kind of thing, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. I would say though that it's definitely solidifying David Johnson over him for me. And I think for a lot of people, that's the case.
Yes. That's actually a good point. Cause it's, I think, off season long, we've been trying to decide who's worthy of the number 1 pick. And I think you're right. David Johnson is kind of edging that out.
Yeah, for sure. So outside of that, we've got Jay Ajayi, who suffered a concussion earlier in the week. He's cleared from the concussion protocol. He's going to be playing in the second preseason game. Don't worry about that. In Philadelphia, Ryan Matthews got cut. You've always been, or at least recently, have been a Blunt proponent. What do you think this does for that backfield? Are you upgrading Blunt more? Or are there other guys you're looking at?
Yeah, I'll upgrade Blunt more. I think when me and Don, I forget who we did the podcast with, but we did the NFC East, and we touched on Blunt, and we talked about it as if Ryan Matthews was going to get cut. So we pretty much covered our bases there because we expected this to happen. So carries go up for Blunt, upside goes up for Blunt. I think maybe a slight bump even to Darren Sproles because they just have the 2 guys that they need. They have the power back in LeGarrette Blunt, and they have the pass catching veteran out of the backfield with Darren Sproles.
Yeah, Sproles is going really low, and he's kind of a guy who's been wondering if he shouldn't be going higher. And I don't know. I think I'm going to start scooping him up a lot in drafts just based on where he's going.
Yeah, I wouldn't reach on him by any means. He's going in the way late, like 13 and beyond. So I guess in your real drafts, maybe start looking around like 11 or 12 for Darren Sproles.
Yeah, I was going to say I always say any pick after round 10, like I'm not going to fault you for it. I wouldn't fault you for taking Darren Sproles in round 10.
Sure. Yeah, there you go. Don't let the opportunity, make you get cocky and kind of miss out on him.
Exactly. Outside of that, we have Jordan Matthews, new Buffalo Bill. He has, what is it? It's like
chipped sternum.
Chipped sternum, which sounds like super wild, but apparently he's going to be back sooner rather than later. Don't really read too much into it. That being said, like his situation in Buffalo is weird. It's not necessarily good. Tyrod didn't play well in preseason action so far. And we'll see how that shakes out. So keep an eye out there. And then what were the couple standouts from preseason week 2 so far? Let me give me your insight on that, Vinny.
A couple cool things. Doug Martin is lighting it up, which I think, to my point, I think I made on the last podcast. Or wait, that wasn't even the podcast. Sorry. But Jacquizz Rodgers will probably not have a safe role. I know they were saying he was threatening to keep Doug Martin at bay, but I think Doug Martin comes back as his job. He looked awesome weeks 1 and 2, specifically 2, which was today. So that is a plus, I think, if you're looking to scoop up Doug Martin, if you're looking to play that game and wait out the suspension.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to see him playing well, and hopefully you can get him a little bit below his ADP and kind of go from there. Also, it seems like Allen Robinson is getting targets, which is good. He was targeted 8 times in the first half of the preseason game today. Remember, this is still Blake Bortles targeting him. But it's nice to see that he's, he has the eye of Bortles, at least early in the preseason. It makes me a little bit more comfortable with him at his ADP.
Yeah, and I think you know what you're getting with Allen Robinson. It's going to be a lot of targets, very poor catch rate, but, that garbage time comes around and you kind of forget that he's going to go off at some point on your team.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, dude, I think that'll do it for the news for now. Let's get right into the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think the first thing to talk about, I suppose, is Alex Smith and maybe not his impact in fantasy, but his impact on the rest of the weapons here. And the fact that they did draft Pat Mahomes, who apparently is looking good. He's trying to throw the ball downfield a lot in preseason and training camp. That's something Alex Smith has not done. If you haven't been living under a rock for the past several years, you know that Alex Smith does not throw the ball down the field. So I guess my question is this. Do you think there's a chance that Alex Smith doesn't finish the season as Kansas City's starter?
No, not really. Unless there's an injury, of course. So I think it's Alex Smith's job for this year, probably next year even. Well, it depends with his contract situation, but they did trade up to get Pat Mahomes. So it's a little worrisome, but I think that's for next year, not this year specifically. So I think it's going to be Alex Smith and his very floor-like play throughout the season.
Yeah, I could see them if they're sitting at 3-7 after week 10. I think I could see him just being all right, fuck it, we're going to Mahomes for the rest of the year, see what he's got.
You think they're going to be that bad?
No, I don't. I think they're going to be. I think they're going to be significantly better than that. But It's the NFL. It's anything can happen in terms of record and whatever else. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Mahomes at some point in this year, and just keep in mind as the year goes on that if that does happen, that impacts all the pass catchers on this team because he's a completely different kind of quarterback than Alex Smith. That being said, Alex Smith is not being drafted. Do you think he should be?
No, we're always tempted to stream him on bye weeks or if our quarterback is injured or something like that, but he really didn't play great. His completion percentage is awesome, but he doesn't take a lot of shots. He only had 15 total touchdowns passing. That's not good. So the upside is clearly not even remotely there for Alex Smith. So when you're playing him, it better be the best possible matchup you can swing him on that particular week, or just don't even bother.
Yeah, he's a streaming option in bye weeks. That's kind of what it is. And you know what you're getting with him. You're getting a floor, but you're not getting that ceiling. Let's move on to the running backs. So for the general sake of it, all the ADPs I'm getting for this are from Fantasy Football Calculator. They're from 12-team PPR drafts. So Spencer Ware is the first running back, the starter right now for the Chiefs. He is the 12th pick in the 4th round right now. That's running back 21. Now, Spencer Ware came out great in the beginning of last year, really slowed down after he got that concussion midseason and ended up even losing work to Kendrick West as the season went on. Do you think this is a fair price for him? And what do you kind of expect from him this year?
I'm expecting more of the same. I think, he's going to have his fair shot to take the starting job. Or to see if he can go the whole season, because that was really the question after that concussion happened, because he really broke down. They started doing other things. Andy Reid's kind of tricky when it comes to stuff like that, but I'm expecting more of the same. I don't know. I'm not very confident that he's going to go over 1,000 yards, but he's a solid option at if he's going at RB 21, that's completely fine. And when it gets to that 5th round, RBs are really shot. So if you need to bail out your team with a solid pick, at least for the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, you can probably bank on Spencer Ware getting a decent amount of work.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like the work that he seems like he's in line for before. And I'm also of the opinion that Spencer Ware is good. I think last year towards the end of the season was maybe him wearing down. Maybe he was hurt. Things like that. I think he's a better running back than he showed at the end of the season last year. So I'd expect him to look more like the Spencer Ware of early 2016 and the end of 2015, where he was very, very productive. And I like that price for him as well. They brought in rookie Kareem Hunt out of Toledo. I don't really have a strong opinion either way on whether or not Kareem Hunt is good. I don't really know. That being said, he's being drafted as if he's going to at least see some work this year. So currently he's going 5th pick of the 8th round. That's running back 37. I think that's a little too high for me to take him, but what's your opinion here?
Yeah, it's a little too high for me as well, but it's a lot better than the other rookies who are rookie running backs that are currently behind starters, like Dalvin Cook, who we complain about every podcast. so that ADP is fair, but a little too pricey for me. He's good. He can shake off initial defenders and stuff like that. He has great vision. But other than that, it's going to take a lot to, I think, overtake Ware for the job. And that kind of seems like something that'll take 10 plus games to me, especially unless there's an injury to Spencer Ware. But he already did beat out Charkandrick West. So there is that. So I think he will get a little bit of work, but I think it's one of those moments where people overestimate how good a rookie running back is going to do in a situation where there's already a guy in front of him who's pretty good. Right.
I kind of think it's you're throwing away your draft pick there, because chances are you're taking him in the 8th round. Just if you're the type of person who freely uses the waiver wire, let's say, there's a decent chance Kareem Hunt produces this year and it's not on your team. Because as you said, I think the more likely thing is if he takes work from Spencer Ware, it's midway through the season, 3/4 of the way through the season, towards the end of the season. So, I mean, you're not going to sit there with Kareem Hunt on your bench doing nothing for weeks on end. You're going to end up potentially dropping him. So I'm not about that price at all, really. You mentioned Charkandrick West and also CJ Spiller is there. It should be mentioned, or maybe it shouldn't be mentioned. I don't really know. Is there any reason to think anything about either one of them?
No, I mean, West is pretty much on the roster bubble at this point, and CJ Spiller I'm kind of just sick of. So no thanks.
That's extremely fair. All right, let's move on to wide receiver. There is only one wide receiver being drafted for the Chiefs right now, and that is Tyreek Hill. He's going 4.02. That's wide receiver 18 overall. His season is one that a lot of people are having a tough time predicting. I am certainly one of those people as well. What do you think about Tyreek Hill? Are you willing to invest in him there?
It's very hard to judge, like you just said, and I've kind of flipped. Like, I kind of like him now in a weird way, because I hated him when we first started podcasting at the beginning of the offseason, but I've seen him start to slide in drafts because I think people are afraid, which is totally makes sense. He's due for some serious touchdown regression. He had 9 total touchdowns and only, I think, in the realm of like 70 total touches. So there's got to be some regression there, and it's going to be a little scary if you can't get those touchdowns, and especially in like a low-powered offense that Alex Smith is commanding. So I understand why people are scared, but when he starts to slide, it becomes very appealing because he is a huge playmaker.
Right, and my concern with him is that, one, he's not a great route runner. He's not like a pure wide receiver. He's kind of an athlete who you want to get him the ball in space and just let him do what he can with it, because he's great at that. But my concerns are one, that he's going to have to be more of a wide receiver, and then 2, that teams have had an offseason to plan for him. They're not planning for Jeremy Maclin. They're not, outside of Travis Kelce, there's no one else in this passing game that you're keying in on outside of Tyreek Hill. So teams are going to be directing the majority of their resources, or potentially their best resources, to covering Tyreek Hill. So I think you could see his efficiency dip. He's certainly going to get plenty of targets. If I'm taking a flyer that early, or around that area of the draft, I shouldn't say flyer, but if I'm taking a huge boomer bust pick around that area of the draft, I'm taking Martavis Bryant around later. I'm not taking Tyreek Hill. So
yeah, that's completely fair. And to your mention of Jeremy Maclin, I actually did a little bit of deep diving into the Chiefs season here. And when Maclin went down with the injury, their offense was functioning for weeks without him. So we've already kind of gotten a look at what they're going to be able to do, like Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, and they were actually totally fine. So to like that argument, I don't know if it's too crazy to expect any more or less than what we saw towards like the end of the season for the Chiefs, because Maclin was pretty much out of the picture at that point, and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce both did really well.
Right. No, that's a very good point. We certainly have seen that. I believe it was like 4 games or so that we saw without Maclin.
I think so.
But yeah, that's a very good point. I'm just a little bit concerned about teams having that off season, but there's certainly a lot of upside there. You've got the upside for, close to 100 catches, if not 100 catches, and just like a freak athlete getting the ball in his hands 100 times. Like, that's pretty good. The rest of their wide receivers, they have Chris Conley, Albert Wilson, DeAnthony Thomas. None of them are getting drafted. Should any of them? Do we need to mention them at all?
Mentioning them is fine, but I think they're going to be waiver wire ads. I think one is eventually going to start doing some things because I think they have to, right? Someone's got to do something.
Well, the thing is, with Conley and Wilson, at least, they're both downfield guys. And as we said, Alex Smith doesn't throw the ball downfield. I think in the unlikely event that Pat Mahomes takes over at some point, that's when maybe you see Chris Conley or Albert Wilson starting to have value. But I mean, the Chiefs have been when was the last time the Chiefs supported 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers? You know,
never.
Yeah, we say like it has to happen, but like I don't think it does. You know,
that's actually a good point.
I think this pass game is more likely to just be Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce going nuts, and then kind of the scraps being picked up by the rest of that wide receiver core and the RBs. But yeah, since I mentioned Travis Kelce there, we might as well lead on into him and the rest of the tight end position. 4.01 tight end number 2 off the board. I love Travis Kelce, which should be unsurprising to pretty much everyone who has ever listened to me before. What do you think about him there?
It's always going to be too pricey for me. If I'm taking a tight end early, it's going to be Gronk or nobody, and then there's that huge gap, and then I'll take a scrub at the end. So my opinion of Travis Kelce is he's fantastic, but for me, it's too much to spend on a tight end. But I just don't like his red zone potential, really. I feel like that's kind of an overvalued asset of like people hear tight end, they're like, oh, touchdowns, red zone threat. Travis Kelce, that's not really his thing. He has to function on like a lot of targets and playmaking. So he's kind of a different tight end in that aspect. So we never really saw his touchdown numbers increase. I mean, they totally could because he's just a natural athlete and very good playmaker, but I don't really see him getting over 5 touchdowns again.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I feel like I feel like he could get around like 7 or 8 maybe, but that's probably the high end of the range of outcomes. I like him just because where else are you going to get a tight end who's that athletic, who lines up all over the field, and is also going to get probably 130 plus targets, you know? I would be very surprised if he doesn't lead the league in tight end targets this year. So anytime you can get that much volume, I'm pretty willing to invest in it. On the touchdown situation as well, I also wouldn't be surprised to see Travis Kelce owners frustrated many times a year when they throw towards Demetrius Harris, who's the number 2 tight end in the red zone, because he's 6'7". And a former basketball player and can kind of box people out in the end zone. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the touchdowns there go Harris's way rather than Kelce's.
Yeah, that's going to kill you every week.
The good old Lance Kendrick syndrome with Jared Cook.
I've seen that too many times, and I shouldn't have done that to myself.
So frustrating, dude. So frustrating. And, we'll see what happens. But yeah, that pretty much does it for the Chiefs, I think. Do you have anything else on the Chiefs?
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Let's take a quick break to hear from Vupiq.
This year, dominate your friends with free play-by-play fantasy football from Vupiq. Vupiq is the first play-to-play fantasy football game where you crush your friends from the comfort of your own couch. For the first time in fantasy football, you must think like the players and coaches on the field as you predict the outcome of every play. Visit Vupiq.com, VUPIQ.com, and sign up now for an invitation to beta test.
All right, guys, we're back, and we're ready to talk about the Oakland goddamn Raiders, soon to be the Las Vegas Raiders, but whatever. They're still in Oakland now. That's why Marshawn came back to them. Let's start with the quarterback situation. Derek Carr is, their quarterback. EJ Manuel's their backup now, which is interesting, kind of. It's not interesting. Anyway, Derek Carr is going 5th quarterback overall. That is 7.02. What do you think of Derek Carr there? Are you willing to get in on that or not about it?
I'm not about that price. Like, I love Derek Carr and what he's been able to do, but holy shit, man, QB5 in a very tough division with some very tough defenses. I can't buy into it. Not at that price. And you got to be thinking that they're going to run more after seeing what happened to Derek Carr late in the season. He almost threw, 500 and almost 560 passes last year and a ridiculous completion rate and only threw 6 picks. I just think he's due for all sorts of regression in all the wrong places. So I'm very worried about Derek Carr, especially mainly the price is what's killing it for me because I do love Derek Carr outside of the price.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I think he's being extremely overdrafted. And it's just one of those things where last year they were forced to pass the ball a lot. They played in a lot of very close games. The defense should be a little bit better this year. I know we say that every year with the Raiders, but the defense should be a little bit better this year, which might keep them out of these shootouts a little bit more. And really, Derek Carr survived on those shootouts in terms of fantasy production. So fewer shootouts, less fantasy production. No reason to draft him at quarterback 5 when it's very, very possible that he gets outperformed fantasy wise by guys like Phillip Rivers or that sort of thing. So yeah, I don't see any reason to draft him there.
You're pretty much.
I am happy they extended him though. That's nice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But you're pretty much buying him even further than what his ceiling is. I think he ended last year as QB. I think he ended right on the outside at QB 11. So taking him at 5 is super wishful thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk about the running backs. They brought in Marshawn Lynch, obviously the big news of the offseason, after he, spent a season on the sideline. So now we've got Marshawn Lynch, we've got DeAndre Washington, Jalen Richard, and then Elijah Hood back there. Lynch is going 3.06, running back 14. He is one of those make or break picks. He's very, very risky. Could pay off for you huge, could not. What do you think about him going in the 3rd there, Vinny?
I think it's about right. It's still on that fringe of too pricey, but I feel like his when he signed with the Raiders, everybody freaked out. He's going to have an amazing year. He's going to be awesome. And then his ADP kind of overcorrected itself, and he slid all the way towards the end of the 3rd. And I've seen him slide into the 4th, which I think is great. But when you look at what you can expect, and from what I've seen people projecting him, it's pretty much all the same. No one really expects him to go over 1,000 yards, but they're still expecting double-digit touchdowns, which I think is fair. But then why wouldn't you absolutely take him in the 3rd? If he's going to be a double touchdown guy and you're expecting 10 at the minimum, that's a 3rd round price to me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The Raiders have said they don't want to give him more than 200 carries, and they're going to use a decent amount of DeAndre Washington and Jalen Richard. So he's going to have that Latavius Murray role from last year, which is, very touchdown dependent, a lot of yards on the ground. I think Marshawn's a better, pure runner than Latavius is. And Marshawn's also playing behind the best offensive line that he's ever had in his whole career. So that's certainly a big plus. But what you're buying when you buy Marshawn Lynch is a guy who's not going to catch balls out of the backfield and who needs to score a touchdown in order to really make you happy with his performance that week. I think more weeks than not, he's going to score that touchdown. But that's really what it is too. Touchdown dependent guys, you love him one week and you hate him the next. So I think it's worth it just because he does have all that touchdown upside. I'd be surprised if he has below 12 touchdowns on the year. And also that Latavius Murray role from last year, he was a low end RB1 by the end of the season.
Yeah,
So if Latavius was doing that, then Marshawn should at least be able to do that as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if you're banking on or if you really want to take Marshawn Lynch this year, look at Latavius Murray's numbers from last year. They're more than doable. They're good. They're very good. And then that's pretty much what you can expect. Exactly what he got. I think he just went over 1,000 yards. He had 12 touchdowns, I think.
Let me take a look.
Sure. But yeah, like we said, double-digit touchdowns. So, you pretty much know what you're doing at this point, what you're risking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let me see. I'm just pulling up Latavius' stats from last year. He had 12 touchdowns. Yep.
Gotcha.
12 touchdowns, 788 yards rushing, but that was only in 14 games. So he missed a couple of games there. The year before, he went over 1,000 yards rushing.
Oh, that's what I meant.
Yep. All All right, so the other running back being drafted there is DeAndre Washington. He's being drafted as the 12th pick in the 13th round. That's running back 63. I value him and Rashard basically the same. They're similar types of backs. It's worth noting that if you're in a league that counts kick return touchdowns, you should be taking Rashard over Washington as your late round flyer because he's their kick returner as well. But that's kind of some niche stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, also, if you want to handcuff Lynch at any point in the draft, go for DeAndre Washington, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Lynch goes down, it'll be the two of them basically getting a 50-50 split. So, I mean, I don't know which one I would necessarily draft. I think Rashard has more big play potential, but we'll see. It's also worth noting that Elijah Hood is there out of North Carolina. He's a rookie. He's a 230-pounder. He's a big boy. So if you do see something where Marshawn gets hurt, just know that it's not necessarily a given that Washington and Rashard, or one of Washington or Rashard, is going to get the goal line work because Elijah Hood's there and he is a large man. You got anything else on the running backs?
No, you pretty much got it. I was very confused with those three guys, so you cleared that up for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people too.
Word up. All right, so on to the wide receivers. We have Amari Cooper going 2.06. That's wide receiver 8. We have Michael Crabtree, 4.07, wide receiver 21. You're a big Crabtree guy, I know, and I think really most of us at Let's Talk Fantasy Football are big Crabtree guys. What do you think about these two guys this year relative to their value?
Relative to their value, I'm loving Crabtree. Absolutely. He's a guy like, I think in our first mock you took in the 3rd round, which is a full round ahead of his ADP. So, and completely justified. And it makes total sense. Why would you pass on a guy who's going to get red zone looks, go over 1,000 yards, probably in like the 80, 90 catch section when it's all said and done at the end of the season. So it's always weird to see how far Crabtree falls off. I don't really understand why. Like in comparison to Cooper, it just really blows my mind. And then another thing that blows my mind is people talk shit about like Cooper because they're expecting him to have this huge year, and he's had amazing years his first 2 years. But everyone's just expecting more and more. It's like I don't really know what you want out of this guy. Like a couple more touchdowns, that's all you need. But they're both great. But looking at their ADPs, I'd much rather go after Crabtree.
Yeah, Crabtree's the better guy for value for sure. The story of these two guys the past 2 years when they've been playing together is basically Crabtree gets more targets and he gets more red zone targets, therefore more touchdowns. Cooper ends up with more total yards on the year, which makes sense. And I know like last year that the train of thought was sort of, that was the first year, but this year Cooper's going to get the red zone targets and he's going to get more targets because he's better. And maybe target wise, you see that start to like total targets, not red zone, but like maybe total targets, you start to see that change where Cooper maybe leads Crabtree in targets or whatever it is. But those red zone targets, that's not going to change, I don't think. And the reason for that is because Amari Cooper is a very good wide receiver because he runs very, very good routes and he gets separation from defensive backs. Whereas Crabtree is kind of a guy who can make a contested catch, who can, run a very precise route to where the ball is in a very small window. He's not very far away from that other person. And it makes sense that in the red zone, you'd want that person rather than the guy who relies on separation because there's just less space in the red zone. So I think intuitively it makes a ton of sense that Crabtree would get the majority of those red zone looks again. And you see Cooper is more as that between the 20s guy, occasional red zone targets, and then he'll get his big play touchdowns because he's a freak athlete.
Absolutely, dude. Couldn't have said it better myself, Walsh.
All right. And then also wide receivers there. We have Seth Roberts there. He's their 3rd guy. He comes in and out of relevance because they like him in the red zone too. So he catches a decent amount of touchdowns. Not getting drafted, shouldn't be getting drafted, might be a waiver wire pickup for you when you're desperate one of these weeks. Outside of that, we have Cordarrelle Patterson, and maybe a change of scenery does something for him. He was actually pretty good down the stretch for the Vikings. Obviously not a guy that you're drafting, but definitely keep a close eye on how much work he's getting and what he's doing with it, because who knows, this is a guy who was being taken in like the second round of drafts only like 3 years ago. So yeah, I mean, do you have any interest in Patterson as a flyer?
No, not really. I mean, I'm really hoping he doesn't take away from Seth Roberts' role because I like playing him in daily.
Okay, fair enough.
but yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to shit on your dreams there, Walsh. I just fuck Cordell Patterson, dude.
I'm like, hey, keep a hard eye out on Cordell Patterson, right, dude? Nope, go fuck yourself.
Absolutely not.
That's all right. That's a very fair take as well. I'm gonna keep an eye on Cordell Patterson because I'm stupid. But yeah, that does it for the relevant wide receivers there. And then at tight end, we have Jared Cook, who got brought in from the Packers. They have Lee Smith. He was out all of last year. I believe he broke his leg. He's a blocking tight end, though. He's on the field a lot, but he doesn't run routes really, doesn't catch any passes. And then they do have Clive Walford, the third-year tight end, who really had a disappointing second-year season. And it kind of shows you what they think of him, the fact that they did bring in Jared Cook. And this actually goes to one of our questions for this podcast from Eric. Basically, will Jared Cook be fantasy relevant this year? So, Vinny, will Jared Cook be fantasy relevant this year?
Man, I hope so. I've been trying so many years to get Jared Cook relevant, and he just doesn't want to be. It's kind of hard to judge what he's going to do with the Raiders because I feel like the Raiders don't target their tight ends all that often, and then maybe like Clive Walford has been a guy who's caught like a touchdown like 2 weeks in a row, and you're like, maybe I'll pick him up, and then you pick him up and you play him, and he gets fucking a catch for 5 yards. So I don't know really what he's going to bring to the offense. Do you think they're going to be more enticed to throw his way? I don't know if he fits their scheme or anything like that.
Well, so here's the thing. I think he'll be useful, but the biggest folly with analyzing Jared Cook that all of us have had, and all of us collectively, is everyone who's loved Jared Cook for a long time.
So just me and you?
There are people out there, man. So the biggest folly that we've had is thinking that Jared Cook is a red zone target because he's like 6'8" and fast as shit. He's not. He's not a red zone target, and he's never been a red zone target. That's why Lance Kendricks was used so extensively with the Rams. It's just he's not that guy. He's great in between the 20s, but I don't want a tight end on my fantasy roster who's going to get 6 targets a game and barely any red zone targets. The thing with the 6 target a game tight ends is that normally they get those red zone targets. Cook has never proved to be a red zone target in his entire career. I don't see that changing this year.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So basically, Eric, we do not think Jared Cook will be fantasy relevant.
Maybe a streamer, maybe a DFS play, not a guy you should be drafting.
Yeah, good point.
All right. And then, beyond that, I mean, if there's any injuries, I guess keep an eye on Walford because maybe he'll do better this year. But I think that's pretty much it for the Raiders. We'll see how the season goes. I'm very excited. The other question that we had, and we kind of touched on this, was from Ed. It was about Tyreek Hill. He said, will Tyreek Hill be a reliable fantasy option, or will he be a boom bust guy and drive you crazy? I think you're more of the opinion that he's a reliable fantasy option. I'm kind of more of the boom bust and drive you crazy opinion. Is that right?
Yeah, that's safe to say.
All right. I mean, so it's difficult. He's certainly going to get the targets, but we'll see what happens there.
That's the only thing keeping me interested is he's like they're going to have to go to him or Kelsey. So that's just 2 guys on the offense that they're going to have to funnel everything to. So that's kind of what I think will keep him in relevancy. And then, if the Chiefs ever get down or something, they're going to have to play catch up and they're going to have to throw to Tyreek Hill. So that's really the only reason I think he'll be reliable.
All right, fair enough. So with that being said, we're gonna wrap up the part 1 of the AFC West podcast. Make sure you check out the apps on Android and iOS. Let's Talk FantasyFootball.com/Apple and Let's Talk FantasyFootball.com/Android. If you have one of the Amazon Echoes, definitely check out Let's Talk Fantasy Football on there. Give us a review on iTunes. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes. And make sure you guys are mock drafting because it's really fucking important. I know Vinny and Rogers secretly do mock drafts throughout the entire week, and talk to each other about them and whisper sweet nothings into each other's ears. We're going to be back, guys. We'll be back with the Chargers and the Broncos in part 2 of the AFC West preview. But for Vinny, I am Walsh. Later, podcast.
This has been Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Thanks for listening.